There's a certain time of day and a certain time of year when the sun sets and the weather cools, where the leaves change and the winds chill. Light retreats, darkness advances, and imagination takes over. It all occurs during that brief period of time known as the Twilight-Tober Zone. This is it! The last original Twilight Zone episode aired on June 19th, 1964. It was the end of a once-in-a-lifetime run that continues to entertain fans around the world. But was the Bewitchin Pool a worthy send-off for one of the greatest television shows in history?
Children, your father and I are going to divorce.
Go to hell and get burned up.
Well, Sport and Jeb Sherwood are siblings whose parents are splitting up. When they're told the news, they dive into their large pool and don't resurface. Their father, Gil, goes in after them, but his children have vanished. We flash back to some time before this event. The Sherwoods are an affluent family. Behind the ideal picture of wealth, Gil and his wife Gloria constantly bicker. In their despair, the kids try to ignore the disillusion of their family when a boy in a straw hat pops up in their pool asking if they want to have some fun. The siblings follow the boy underwater. They come up for air in a pond located in the middle of a forest. Close by is a house surrounded by dozens of kids happily playing. Inside is an old woman named Aunt T. She explains this place as paradise for the children of unworthy parents. Sport can hear her mom and dad yelling in the distance and forces Jeb to return home. But Jeb eventually goes back to Aunt T's without his sister, leading to Sport following him with promises that their parents are working things out.
You're gonna suffocate yourself.
It's the only way I can keep quiet.
Might as well address the elephant in the room. All the exterior scenes in this episode are horrifically ADR'd, and it is beyond distracting. Apparently, there were substantially loud noises during filming that made most of the sound unusable. The only time we hear on-set audio is inside Aunt T's house.
Oh, what? Back already?
We didn't go yet. May I do that too? Me too?
Sometimes nothing can be done about these types of things. You just have to do your best to fix up the piece of work in post-production. But this is some of the worst ADR I've ever heard.
Come back here. We're not through with you. Are you coming out of there or I'm coming after you?
What's the maid for, Sugar?
And what are you for, Sugar?
I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
The biggest offender that most people discuss when this episode is brought up is the Sport character.
Who ever heard of a fat witch?
Mary Badham plays her on screen, but most of her dialogue is dubbed by famous voice actor June Foray. Foray also provided the voice of Talkie Tina from Living Doll earlier this season, and is of course known for voicing dozens of characters during her career. This was quite the egregious attempt by the production team to replicate Mary Badham's speech, and it destroys any credibility the story may have built up. According to online sources, Badham originally recorded vocals to replace the on-set audio, but they were also deemed unusable. By the time this was realized, the child actress was already back home across the country, and flying her out to LA for the recording session wasn't feasible. Foray was then brought in to loop her character. Some of the blame for the shortcomings of this installment have fallen on director Joseph M. Newman. His first two episodes, In Praise of Pip and The Last Night of a Jockey, are decent to good products. Black Leather Jackets wasn't great, but that had more to do with a bad script than his directing. Both producer William Frug and the writer of The Bewitchin Pool, Earl Hamner Jr., weren't fans of Newman's work. Referencing Newman and Badham's lead performance in the Twilight Zone companion, Frug goes as far to say, quote, "I never worked with him again. I just didn't like what he did with her at all. It was all overplayed and corny, I thought, even granted it was a children's story," unquote. Hamner has a commentary track on the Blu-ray where he called the acting forced and unbelievable, and the directing unacceptable. The one performance he thought had some merit was Mary Badham as Sport. Hamner's gripes with the adaptation of his teleplay didn't stop with the performances. He didn't like the title, thinking the Bewitchin Pool didn't fit the narrative, a narrative that was originally quite different. Hamner's working title was The Marvelous Pool, and there were several exchanges and little eccentricities for the characters that didn't make the final show. There's no doubt a better Twilight Zone installment could have been derived from the written source material. It was published in full in the 2003 book, The Twilight Zone Scripts of Earl Hamner. He was inspired to write the story by moving out to the West Coast and seeing so many divorces. Empathizing with the children of broken homes, he imagined a Peter Pan-type escape for kids. He also showed his hand on country people versus city people by giving the kids Southern accents, a detail the parents didn't share. Hamner's concept hadn't been done in quite this fashion on the series. I don't think it would have been a personal favorite if it was done right, but one could see the obvious improvements in the writer's initial vision. I have to judge what went to air, and unfortunately, there are next to no redeeming qualities about the Bewitchin Pool. Even Mary Badham, the performance Earl Hamner praised, doesn't hold up well when she's fully portraying the character.
She's a kidnapper.
Badham was most famous for playing Scout Finch in the 1962 movie To Kill a Mockingbird. When Hamner found out she was playing the lead in his story, he changed the names of the children to be a takeoff Scout and Jem from the film. Aunt T is the only character that isn't ADR'd at any point. Georgia Simmons doesn't exactly create the warm, loving portrait of a motherly savior of neglected children Hamner was aiming for, and he would say as much in later interviews.
I'll assign you children to your chores, and I'll show you where your rooms will be.
Honestly, she plays it kinda creepy. If Aunt T worked, I think the finished product could have been viewed more favorably. A believably sincere heart at the center of any story could go a long way. Sport is able to convince Jeb to come home again, but as soon as they re-emerge, Gloria tells them about the divorce. Gil says it's their choice who they want to live with, but the siblings are heartbroken and refuse to stay with either. They disappear into the pool and never come back. At Aunt T's, Sport faintly hears the voices of her parents, but ignores them. The siblings have made their choice to stay in a place where they're loved and respected. The Sherwood children leaving their parents for the final time was shown as the episode's teaser before the first commercial break, an aspect not featured in Hamner's teleplay. There was little use for a prologue in a story like this. It was supposedly done to fill out time after they cut some of Hamner's other material. This whole thing was just a hack job from start to finish. I've seen some people call the Bewitchin Pool the worst or among the worst episodes of the first Twilight Zone. There's not much to argue with on that front, just from the poor production quality alone. What we saw was not fit to air on network TV, much less as part of such a quality program. But is it as painful as Mr. Beavis? Cavender is coming? No, I wouldn't quite go that far. Still, it sinks like a 500-pound rock. Best to leave it and its unrealized potential at the bottom of the pool. Despite good ratings, The Twilight Zone wasn't in the top 10 during Season 5 and was cancelled by CBS. It was the end of an era, but the beginning of the show's massive legacy. If you want to see what happened to Rod after The Twilight Zone and a short retrospective on the other iterations of the series, check out the new video on my personal channel, Walter Culture. You can subscribe there for more Twilight Zone content in the future. And that's all, folks. Our 5-year odyssey has come to a close. Thank you for following along all this time. The messages I've received about the love we share for this show has been a highlight. I've seen many comments that people were introduced to the Twilight Zone by my reviews, and that's got to be the greatest honor of all. Rod Serling has become one of my favorite media personalities of all time, and his work, along with the work of so many others, will live on for generations. As I exit this enchanting arena of shadow and substance, I know a piece of it will always be with me. It was a pleasure to walk through that door with you and traverse the Twilight Zone. Happy Halloween! Congratulations are in order. You've walked through the valley and came out the other side on the year of Mr. Rod Serling's 100th birthday. It was an adventure filled with ups and downs, buckles and breaks, and one constant, inexplicable feeling. Where your travels lead to next is up to you. But as you walk through that door and back to reality, know this: you'll always have a friend waiting for you in the Twilight Zone. Farewell.